Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today, well, it's about tackling this really persistent tension, this fundamental paradox of power.
Right. How does a huge company, maybe an old industrial giant or like a modern tech empire?
Yeah, how do they balance that idealistic mission statement, the don't be evil kind of thing?
Exactly, with the often brutal reality of getting and keeping global dominance.
It's like this constant clash between the talk and the actions needed to build that massive scale.
It really is. In our sources, they dig into this historical and digital pattern, showing how the road to huge scale and profit, especially using data or monopoly tactics,
Uh-huh.
it almost always means, well, stepping away, sometimes sharply, from those initial ethical promises.
So we're kind of tracing the history of compromise here. For you, the listener, this deep dive is really about seeing the playbook these titans use.
Yeah, the sort of necessary ethical trade-offs that get woven into building these empires.
And we're asking, what's the cost? To competitors, to us as customers, and, well, ultimately to society when private power gets this big, this unregulated.
We'll follow this thread starting way back with the industrial tycoons who kind of wrote the first draft of this playbook.
Then move through early Silicon Valley's, let's say, aggressive gray phase.
Right, and land right in today's world, the age of the data machine, looking at how convenience got so tangled up with unprecedented surveillance.
Okay, so let's start by saying this isn't new, right? This tension. The playbook, as you said, was written way back late 19th century.
Absolutely. Figures like Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, they really perfected a model where, let's be honest, moral flexibility was often key to getting big.
They were working in a time with almost no rules, really.
Pretty much zero regulation. And they set this pattern. Build the empire aggressively, then maybe tone for it later with public philanthropy. Look at Carnegie.
The library guy, right?
Hmm.
Built libraries everywhere.
That's the image, the enlightened industrialist. But the sources show how he actually funded his early rise. Well, wasn't exactly transparent.
Okay, give us an example. What kind of pragmatism were you talking about?
Well, take his deals with railroad bonds. There's actual documentation showing him getting this huge check, over $29,000 back in 1872.
Which is, what today? A lot.
Over $6 million today. Just one payment. From profits on Gilman railroad bonds. But here's the thing. The firm's letter about it was marked confidential.
Ah, okay. So secrecy was baked in from the start. To get that initial capital, things had to be kept quiet, leveraging information nobody else had.
That's it. And it sometimes meant selling a vision that maybe wasn't entirely grounded in immediate reality.
Like promises you can't quite keep.
Exactly. Carnegie, when he was trading bonds, he made promises he basically knew couldn't be met. The classic case is the St. Louis Bridge project.
That was a huge engineering challenge for its time, right? Needed new tech.
It did. So Carnegie sells the bonds, promising investors the bridge would be making money from tolls within 18 months. Fast turnaround. But he knew that was pretty much impossible. The chief engineer, Captain Eads, was insistent the bridge had to be built with steel.
And steel back then was.
Super expensive, brittle, really hard to get enough of it for a giant project like that.
So he sold the bonds based on a deadline that the key material, the steel, made impossible from the get-go. That's more than just optimistic selling.
It feels like building the failure into the plan, almost. It suggests the promise itself was just the tool needed to get the money, The actual deadline miss was maybe secondary.
Wow. It really shows how early American finance worked. Get the capital first, worry about the details later. The narrative was key.
The powerful narrative could trump the technical reality. The risk was known, maybe priced in, but you needed that promise to make the deal happen.
Okay, so if Carnegie used ambitious sales and maybe some flexible promises, Rockefeller was different, more structural.
Yeah. John D. Rockefeller Sr. His strategy was like nonviolent but totally overwhelming coercion. He didn't want to fight. He wanted rivals to just give up, submit.
How did he do that without, actual fighting?
His genius was making it economically impossible for them to even operate. The sources show how paralyzing it was. If a rival firm wouldn't sell out or cooperate, he'd just starve them, cut off their essential supplies and transport.
Starve them how? Like literally?
No, logistically. He might quietly go and buy up every single available wooden barrel in the area.
So they couldn't ship their oil.
Exactly. Can't package it, can't ship it. Or, even more effectively, he'd get control of all the local tank cars, the special rail cars for oil. Just paralyze their ability to move product.
That's kind of ruthlessly brilliant. It's not about price wars. It's about stopping the actual physical business from happening.
It targets the absolute basics.
Yeah.
But interestingly, his goal wasn't always just to crush them. Often he wanted to absorb them.
Assimilate them.
Yeah, seduce competitors into joining him. And critically, he'd often keep their managers. Sources say he kept a fair bit of deadwood on the payroll guys, maybe past their prime.
Oh, I do that if they weren't productive.
For harmony. To keep the growing empire stable and integrated. Control and coherence were sometimes more valuable to him than just pure cutthroat efficiency.
So keeping the machine running smoothly mattered more than trimming every last bit of fat. That's interesting.
It shows a long-term view of organizational stability, but the real engine behind his dominance, the railroads.
Ah, the infamous rebates, where big companies got huge discounts.
Massive discounts. Railroads were supposed to charge everyone fairly, but they gave guys like Rockefeller these secret deals, the rebates. He profited enormously.
It basically subsidized his growth and made it impossible for smaller guys to compete on shipping costs.
Totally. And when people called him out on the secrecy, Rockefeller's defense was basically, well, if we advertised the discounts, everyone would want them.
He framed it as strategy, not unfairness.
Like a general keeping battle plans secret. Business as war. And the scary part, lawmakers knew. There were reports in Ohio or Pennsylvania back in the 1860s detailing how unfair it was.
But nothing changed for ages.
Not decisively, not for almost 20 years. So Rockefeller just exploited that huge regulatory gap. And that's the pattern we see again and again, right? Dominance often comes from exploiting that space where rules haven't caught up yet.
Okay, that really does set the stage for the digital era. The tools change. It's not oil barrels, it's code and platforms, but that drive for scale, for dominance, it feels the same.
Yeah, and often still wrapped in that language of progress or changing the world. The mission sounds noble, but the methods underneath, maybe not so much.
Like Bill Gates, even early on.
Oh, yeah. His intensity was there from the start. When he was just a teenager with Paul Allen running the Lakeside Programmers Group, the records show he was already making smart deals, profitable ones.
But the key part,
He often did it without really looping in his partners first. Like, he secured the work for the group, but didn't necessarily discuss it fully with Allen or Ken Evans beforehand.
prioritizing the win over the partnership process, already showing that focus on just getting the advantage.
And that intensity was absolutely crucial later, in maybe Microsoft's biggest moment, getting the operating system for the first IBM PC.
Right, they didn't have one ready themselves, did they?
No, the whole project was on the line. They needed an OS, like, immediately. That's where Seattle Computer and 86DOS come in.
The famous acquisition. But it wasn't straightforward.
It sounds like it was pretty chaotic. They got 86DOS, which became MS-DOS. But here's a detail. Seattle Computer gave Microsoft a working copy in September 1980.
Okay.
But the actual formal licensing agreement, the non-exclusive one, wasn't officially signed until 6 days into January 1981, after the year ended.
Wait, so they had the code. They were probably already working with it for the huge IBM deal. But the paperwork wasn't totally finalized for months.
That's what the timeline suggests. It points to, getting the crucial asset first, pushing forward because the project demanded it, and letting the formal agreements catch up. Secure the edge, then handle the details.
That urgency, that need to just move. You see that elsewhere too, like Ray Kroc with McDonald's early on. He had the vision for massive growth.
But the original contract with the McDonald brothers was super restrictive. It was designed to keep everything exactly the same as their original stand.
How restrictive?
It apparently required him to get written approval sent by registered mail from the brothers for any change, anything at all.
Registered mail. For, like, changing the sign height. That sounds slow.
It created massive problems, according to the sources. Kroc wanted to blast into a new town, spend money fast, build buzz, beat the local burger joints, waiting weeks for a letter.
Yeah, that completely kills the speed you need for that kind of explosive growth.
Absolutely. So you see that friction again. The original rigid agreement just couldn't keep pace with the demands of building an empire. Something had to give.
Okay, fast forward to Amazon and Jeff Bezos. That focus on scale becomes almost like a religion, right? The long-term vision.
Totally. Bezos was famous for being customer-obsessed and playing the long game. And that meant being willing to make really tough, short-term sacrifices for the ultimate goal. Unlimited selection.
What kind of sacrifices?
Well, there's a clear example from 2002. Amazon had this platform services business basically handling online sales for big retailers like Target or Toys R Us.
Okay. Sounds profitable.
Hugely profitable. It was bringing in a third of Amazon's total cash flow at the time.
A third. That's massive. You wouldn't mess with that, surely.
You'd think not. But Bezos did. He was apparently much more focused on their own retail side, like how well their own toy store was doing, because that proved their commitment to selection.
So he was willing to let that huge cash cow shrink or even die.
To chase the bigger vision of the everything store. He believed that long-term dominance required that kind of, well, almost sacrificial focus. Let the guaranteed money go to build the ultimate platform.
But when you achieve that kind of dominance, perception changes, doesn't it? Amazon wasn't the underdog forever.
Exactly. By around 2010, 2011, the narrative shifted. Amazon went from being the scrappy internet bookstore to, as the sources put it, a remote and often arrogant giant.
What caused that shift?
Big public fights, things like avoiding sales tax, which states really started pushing back on, and also Amazon just kind of ignoring manufacturers' suggested prices. They got so big, they started playing by their own rules.
And that leads us to the really big shift, right?
Yeah.
The commodity isn't just physical goods or even software anymore. It's us, our information.
Yeah, we enter the era of surveillance capitalism, where the product being refined and sold is personal data, and the trade-off is stark. Incredible convenience, free services.
In exchange for letting companies hoover up unbelievable amounts of our data, creating this huge information imbalance.
And the founders, initially, they often framed it in really idealistic terms. Mark Zuckerberg famously said Facebook was going to change the world, make it a more open place.
That idealistic vision met reality pretty quickly, though, didn't it? With user discomfort.
Almost instantly. There's this anecdote about the Harvard president, Lawrence Summers, mentioning he'd looked at incoming students' profiles on the Facebook, the early version.
Ooh, I bet that didn't go over well.
No. Students suddenly realized these profiles they made for friends were visible to, the powers that be. That clash between openness and actual exposure was immediate.
And it wasn't just a one-off, was it? Facebook seemed to constantly push the boundaries on privacy.
Absolutely. The sources lay out this pattern, this cycle. 2006, Newsfeed launches massive outcry. People felt spied on by their own friends' updates appearing automatically.
Then Beacon in 2007.
Yeah, tracking your purchases on other sites and telling your Facebook friends. Huge privacy disaster. They had to pull it back.
And the default settings.
Right. 2009, shifting the default privacy to everyone. Each time, it was this push towards more public disclosure, followed by user backlash, then a partial retreat. But the direction was always towards more sharing.
Why keep doing it? Why risk the bad PR again and again?
Well, follow the money. That disclosure powered an incredibly lucrative advertising engine. Their engagement ads made nearly $100 million in the first year alone.
Wow. How did they charge?
At least $5 per thousand views, CPM. But the real gold wasn't just the direct ad revenue. It was what they called derivative value.
Okay, unpack that. Derivative value. Sounds a bit complex.
It's basically the free advertising you get after the paid ad. So if an advertiser pays to connect with you, Facebook estimated that brand would then get around 200 additional free impressions.
Just through your network, like your friends seeing you like something?
Exactly. Through your connections, your engagement. So for every dollar spent, they got this huge multiplier effect in free exposure.
Okay, now I see. That creates an absolutely massive incentive to get people sharing everything, connecting with everything. The business model itself demands pushing those privacy boundaries.
It becomes a relentless pressure. And this scale of data harvesting, it's not just a Silicon Valley thing. We really need to look globally, especially at China, to see the sheer scale it reached.
Right, the sources talk about the O2O explosion there. Online to offline.
Yeah. China adopted digital payments and things like peer-to-peer transactions way faster and more comprehensively than the U.S. did initially.
So that meant?
It meant companies suddenly got a fire hose of data about what people were doing offline. Not just browsing, but real-world stuff.
Like what specifically?
The sources say, literally, the what, where, and when of their meals, massages, and day-to-day activities. It wasn't just tracking clicks, it was tracking life.
Okay, that's incredibly granular.
Their meals and massages.
And then the bike sharing boom just took it to another level. Millions of bikes, all connected, tracking movements constantly.
So commutes, trips to the store, rides home, even first dates, apparently. The sheer volume and detail of this location data, connecting digital IDs to real-time physical movements, it just dwarfed what companies like Uber or Lyft were getting in the West at the time.
So while Silicon Valley might have pioneered the model of surveillance capitalism, the conditions in China allowed the actual data collection to hit a totally different magnitude.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily some grand government plan initially, but more how their specific digital market evolved fast, mobile first, integrating payments and real-world services seamlessly.
And this difference, this scale of data, it feeds into who might dominate the next big thing, like AI, right?
That's the argument Kai-Fu Lee makes, who the sources mention. We used to think Silicon Valley had this unbeatable lead because of its culture, its innovation.
But Lee says maybe that culture is also a weakness, complacency.
Kind of. He argues Silicon Valley can sometimes rest on its laurels, one big idea, whereas Chinese entrepreneurs came up in these super competitive, messy markets, often starting as copycats.
So they had to fight harder, be faster, more adaptable.
Exactly. They learned to be incredibly nimble, ruthless, focused on implementation. Lee calls it their secret sauce and suggests it positions China really well to capitalize on AI, which is all about implementation now.
So the lesson again.
Yeah.
Market ruthlessness and speed might actually be more important than where you started ethically when it comes to global tech races.
It certainly looks that way sometimes. The drive for dominance tends to reshape the players. #4, founder cults, and ethical blind spots.
You know, whether it's East or West, that drive often concentrates incredible power in the hands of these, well, charismatic founders.
The visionaries.
Yeah, the founder cult. And when that power and ambition go unchecked, you can get some spectacular flameouts, both ethically and financially.
Like WeWork. Adam Neumann created this whole mystique around it.
He absolutely did. He was brilliant at framing WeWork not as what it fundamentally was, a real estate company leasing office space, which experienced investors like Barry Sternlicht pointed out.
All right, not that exciting from a valuation perspective. No, but Neumann sold it as a community, a tech play, something revolutionary, and people bought it.
Especially SoftBank. That valuation was insane.
$47 billion,
Right.
based almost entirely on that narrative, that vision spun by Neumann. The power of his story completely distorted the financial reality until the harsh light of an IPO process made it all crumble.
So narrative over substance. And then you have Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes. There, it was vision over scientific reality.
The ultimate example? Maybe. Holmes had this unwavering vision. The mini lab had to do everything, all 4 major types of blood tests, immunoassays, general chemistry, hematology, DNA on one small desktop machine from a finger prick.
Which sounded amazing, but technically,
Technically, it was pushing way beyond what was feasible, especially with the methods they were trying to use. It led to fundamental, dangerous flaws.
what was the core technical problem?
One major one was pipette drift. The little robotic arms inside the machine that moved tiny amounts of liquid, they just weren't accurate enough over time using her approach. They would drift.
Meaning the test results would be wrong.
Potentially, yes. And the sources state this drift was so bad, the pipettes needed recalibrating every 2 or 3 months.
And that recalibration took how long?
5 days. The machine would be totally out of action for 5 days every couple of months. That's just not a workable piece of medical diagnostic equipment for real-world use.
So the core product was inherently flawed, incapable of doing what she claimed reliably.
Exactly. The vision dictated a technical path that just didn't work. And when people started questioning this, like the journalist John Carreyrou, well, the power structure closed ranks.
Tell us about that confrontation with David Boies, the famous lawyer Theranos hired. It sounds intense.
It does. Carreyrou describes Boies initially being all friendly, like an amiable grandfatherly figure, trying to charm him.
But Carreyrou kept asking the tough question.
Yeah. And suddenly, Boies' whole demeanor changed. Carreyrou says he started growling and flashing his teeth like an old grizzly bear. It became very intimidating.
Trying to shut him down with legal threats.
Accusing him of relying on stolen information, industrial espionage, using the full force of legal power not to find truth, but to enforce secrecy and protect the founder's narrative, even as it was collapsing.
It's chilling. And this temptation, the allure of power and wealth, can even affect those who present themselves as being above it all, like Steve Jobs.
Yeah, it's an interesting case. When Jobs returned to Apple, he very much played up the $1 a year salary, styled himself as this child of the counterculture, not driven by greed.
Right, the visionary focused only on the product.
But almost immediately upon regaining power, he embraced these huge stock option packages, mega grants they were called.
Mega grants. What was different about them?
They were massive grants, and crucially, they often bypassed the normal corporate governance, like review by a compensation committee or having clear performance targets tied to them. It was just, boom, huge potential reward directly from the leader.
So the counterculture image didn't quite hold up against the reality of exercising power and distributing massive financial rewards.
It suggests that even for someone who cultivated that image, the pull of using financial leverage, rewarding allies, and benefiting personally through these less scrutinized mechanisms was incredibly strong once they were back in charge. The system itself encourages it. Hashtag hedged by 5. Conclusion, and the cost of convenience.
So we've come full circle back to that core dilemma. These giant companies, whether they started with steel or silicon, they provide real value, immense convenience, knowledge, connection.
No doubt about it. They've changed the world, often in positive ways, but the cost of that value seems intrinsically linked to these issues. Systemic compromises, concentrated power, and, especially now, pervasive data harvesting.
And that power just grows and grows. Once a service gets to billions of users, the control they have over information, over markets, it becomes almost impossible to effectively regulate after the fact.
Right. And as we saw with the China example, the global race for dominance doesn't seem to wait for ethical considerations. Being nimble, maybe even ruthless, seems almost like a requirement to win in these fast-moving tech arenas.
The messy markets, forging tougher competitors, who are now maybe better positioned for AI's next phase.
It suggests that maybe ruthlessness is unfortunately a pretty effective trait for survival and achieving that kind of scale, which leads to the final, really big question about the cost.
The cost to society, beyond just our data.
Yeah, the sheer amount of private wealth being generated by these structures. When a handful of companies and individuals amass fortunes through surveillance, exploiting regulatory loopholes, playing by their own rules, what does that do to the rest of the economy?
This is where Thomas Piketty's work comes in, right? His analysis of wealth distribution.
Exactly. Piketty looked at Europe, for instance, and made this stark observation. Often, private wealth rests on public poverty. Meaning that while the total wealth in a nation might be incredibly high, the public wealthy assets held by the government for the benefit of all citizens is often near zero or even negative because of public debt.
So the state, which is supposed to provide public services and regulate these powerful private actors, is actually comparatively poor.
In many cases, yes. And Piketty points out a really unfortunate result of this imbalance.
Which is?
We often end up spending more taxpayer money just paying interest on that public debt than we invest in crucial public goods, like, say, higher education, things that create broad opportunity.
Wow, okay. So the very mechanisms that build this immense private tech wealth data extraction, avoiding regulation, achieving monopoly scale, might actually be contributing to the weakening of the public systems that are supposed to support everyone else.
That's the worrying connection. It raises this really profound final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Okay.
If the very things required to achieve global dominance today, the secrecy, the willingness to bend ethical rules for scale, the relentless drive for data, if those things are fundamentally at odds with those high-minded founding principles, then can any massive dominant company in the modern world ever truly operate without making those deep compromises? Is the model itself inherently paradoxical?
Forcing us to really think about whether the price of all this amazing convenience is not just our data, but maybe the health of our public sphere, too.
That's
a lot to consider. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.
Always a pleasure.